Oh, good. Okay, yeah, so I'm talking very much from a UK perspective, and as Judy's pointed out, the way the TPD is being implemented varies across the EU. Oh, it's gone again. Declaration of interest. Yes, we get funding from Cancer Research UK, British Heart Foundation. We have received funding from the Department of Health. We were set up by the Royal College of Physicians. We do not accept any commercial funding. And the UK context, the UK is a party to the WHO FCTC, which Jeannie talked very well about. It leads Europe on tobacco control implementation. We go further than the EU Tobacco Products Directive, because we've got standardised packaging of tobacco products, then the Advertising Directive. We ban tobacco advertising, promotion and sponsorship completely, including not allowing tobacco products to be on site in shops. And on the Tobacco Tax Directive, we have high rates of taxation. And we are a country where there is strong support for a harm reduction approach. The e-cigarette regulations, I won't go into in any detail, I'm sure most people here know them, but they're on my slides so that anyone looking at the presentation can be reminded. In reviewing the regulations, Public Health England have committed to publish an annual review of e-cigarette regulations, and the next is due by the end of this year. That's to look at what the regulatory environment is impacting on e-cigarettes, but also at the evidence base as it is evolving. And by the 20th of May 2021, and this isn't just for the UK, we must publish a report on the TPD regulations to assess whether they achieve government directives, and if so, whether they could be achieved through less onerous regulatory provision. So that is in place, and subsequent reviews must be published at intervals not exceeding 5 years. And that is actually in the regulations, so it has to happen. That's the good news. The current status of the market, well, we've seen in the UK 30,000 notifications to the MHRA by over 400 firms already, and hundreds more are coming in every week. Once the £150 notification fee has been paid, they can go on sale as soon as basically the notification's been reviewed to show that it's complete. And that's currently taking about a month, so they're not waiting 6 months as they could do. And our survey shows most recently around 2.9 million current vapers, of whom, over half now are not smoking, they're not dual users. 6% of current vapers reported using an e-liquid containing over 20 milligrams, and this survey was carried out before the TPD finally came through in May. And 20% reported using more than 4 ml of e-liquid a day, and only 1% more than 10 ml. So the timeline, as you know, we're in a pretty chaotic state in the UK at the moment. So when I was here last year, I remember very well talking to Konstantinos and Ricardo and a number of other people from around Europe. It was the week before the referendum. And they said, you're a sensible country, you're not going to vote to leave the EU, are you? And I said, don't be too sure. And unfortunately, it came to pass. So on the 29th of March this year, Article 50, which is the article in the EU bill legislation about repeal, was triggered, and we're on the way to leaving the EU. We published a Great Repeal Bill white paper on the 30th of March. We had the one-year transition period over in May. And the Queen's speech, when the government announces its legislative programme, is due next week. We don't have an exact date yet. And publication of the Great Repeal Bill is due shortly thereafter. And then 29th of March 2019, we leave the EU, or later if the negotiations are extended. The white paper on the Great Repeal Bill said that it would repeal the European Communities Act, bring all EU laws onto the UK statute books, and create powers to make secondary legislation possible. Now the implication, I think, is really important for people to understand, because basically existing legislation is going to remain in place. The government has powers to change things, but it isn't going to do anything on e-cigarettes. We have a massive amount of things that are really pressing and urgent. E-cigarettes are not a priority. So there won't be any immediate changes to the legislation even after Brexit, except to rectify problems occurring as a result of leaving the EU. For example, we'll have to have a domestic notification period process because at the moment it goes to an EU portal. And after the general election result we had, changes are even less likely. So, what's the evidence from the UK? How is the e-cigarette market evolving? Well, smoking is still dominant. This is actually now wrong because the data from yesterday that people may have seen published about smoking in the UK, I think the number of smokers is down to about 7.5 million. The number of vapers, according to our survey, has gone up to 2.9 million. And I think the concerning thing is that growth has slowed considerably in recent years. So you can see what our survey shows. You know, between 2012 and 13, 86% growth. 13 to 14, 62%, dropped to 24%, down to 8, down to over the last year 4%. And that's not good. But better news is that actually for the first time this year, our survey showed that just over half of vapers were not smoking at all. And that's the way we want things to go. But, and this is important, well, you know, it's still not perfect. A third of smokers have never vaped. And why? Well, what they tell us is the main reason is their concerns about addictiveness and safety. And 40% of smokers have tried e-cigarettes but no longer use them. Why not? Not a good enough substitute for smoking. Either it didn't feel enough like smoking, so it didn't satisfy them, or it didn't help with cravings, which is pretty much the same thing. Ex-vapers say they would try again if they felt it was a better substitute for smoking, and if they felt confident they were safe. So safety is an issue, even for people who've already tried vaping. And the perceptions of harm, as people may have seen in our data published recently, are going in the wrong direction. You know, in 2013, only 9% of smokers, and this is smokers, thought that e-cigarettes were equally or more harmful than smoking. In 2017, it was 22%, more than doubled. And those who think it's a lot less harmful have gone down, so from 29% to 20%. So even in the UK, where we've got a positive environment, things are going in the wrong direction. So, my conclusions. TPD regulation has not destroyed the e-cigarette market in the UK. It's still growing, but growth has slowed considerably. Misperceptions of harm are not improving among smokers, and that has to change because it's smokers who are the key, particularly smokers who haven't tried vaping. Vapers remain almost entirely ex-smokers and smokers. Revision of the TPD regulations in the next 5 years is unlikely, even if there's a hard Brexit. So we have to make the TPD work. And we have to, you know, people have said, I think it's Simon Chapman, called the UK some kind of laboratory. Well, I hope we're a laboratory in a positive sense, and actually the evidence that smoking is continuing to go down, that e-cigarettes are not a disaster for public health, I hope is evidence that other European nations will listen to, because they can regulate in the same way we are. And as I say, I do not think it's been disastrous for e-cigarettes. And longer term, we need to decide what regulatory changes are needed and are essential to maximise the opportunities for harm reduction and to manage any risks.